everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Lounging with Lo. I am your host, Lo. I'm so happy you guys are here with me today. So, we're going to talk about this very first episode of Castle of Season 1. Again, it was titled Flowers for Your Grave. And before I go any further on here, if you guys have not seen the episode yet, I recommend that you stop the podcast immediately because there will be some spoiler alerts about who the killer is and some plot twists in here, and I don't want you guys to miss out on that. I want you guys to be able to watch it on your own, so please, please, please do not go ahead on this podcast. I want you to stop where you are and watch the episode if you have the ability to do that. But if you've already watched the episode and you're ready to hear the podcast, let's go ahead and start with the podcast. So, again, the title is called Flowers for Your Grave. Now, we have our main characters, obviously, is Richard Castle, Kate Beckett, we have Alexis, Martha, Javier Esposito, Kevin Ryan, Lainey Parrish, and Captain Montgomery. What you don't know is we have some different characters in here. We have Gina, who is Richard's publicist and his second ex-wife. And then we also have another character by the name of Bert, who was Martha's beau from the party we're going to talk about here in just a second. We also have some other characters. We have Kyle Cabot, Harrison Tisdale, Allison Tisdale, Marvin Fisk, Kendra Pitney, and we also have Jonathan Tisdale. So, we have a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and start with the episode here. So, the body is first discovered as, Allison Tisdale is the victim. She's 24 years old. She was a graduate of the New York University, and she was part of the social work program there at the school. And she was also the daughter of Jonathan Tisdale, who was a real estate mogul in New York City. So, we're first introduced to Castle at his book promotion for the Derek Storm novels I was talking about earlier, and he was being threatened by his publicist Gina that he wasn't getting a manuscript together, and, she threatened to take the advance away from him and things like that. And we first learned, again, as mentioned in the introduction of the characters, Martha was living with Alexis and Richard at the time, and she may have told Gina about him not having a manuscript together and things like that, because it's just his creativeness. And while the party's going on, we see Catherine Beckett, or we call Kate. She looks at the body and notices something is very familiar about the way the body's laid out. There are roses all over her body, and there are a pair of sunflowers on her eyes. Well, first of all, that's kind of creepy, but second of all, it just felt really familiar to her for some reason, and she just didn't know. And then she was telling the boys about it, but, Javi's like, just give me a John shot Jane over Richard, and, I'm going to get this case done, because this is just, whatever. So then, she realizes where she found the body from, and it was laid out in a book called Flowers for Your Grave from Richard Castle. So they decided to go find Castle and go question him about, why would the killer choose that particular book? Because 2 weeks ago, before Allison was murdered, they found Marvin Fisk, who was a small claims lawyer. He was on the ground over a pentagram, and that came from Hell Hath No Fury, which only Richard Castle diehard fans have read that book, which is how Castle knew that she was probably a hardcore fan. So, but the main cool thought about this is that, as Kate is explaining to Castle about how the murder goes, it talks about these things, he interrupts her and talks about, the killer does this and this. And she was kind of shocked for a second. It's like, yeah, I kind of know psychology of the murder because that's just what I do. So then, they're going through the fan letters to see it might be a fan going through, trying to go through all this stuff here. And they realized that it was, they found somebody by the name of Kyle Cabot. And we'll get to him in just a second. But while they're looking through the fan letters, Richard uses his powers of deduction, as coined by our good friend, detective friend Sherlock Holmes. He tries to find out the story behind, and that's because of the writer that he is. There's a story behind why Allison was murdered. So then he goes to the whole thing of why Kate became a cop. And like I said, if you've seen the episode, you kind of see that. So then and then back to Kyle Cabot. So they found the print of it, and that's how they connected Allison. And then the whole thing was done. But something just didn't fit right with Castle, so he takes the pictures and some of the cases to the library and plays off like, oh, I guess we're done for the day, or it was good while it lasted. And Kate's like, oh, he's really genuine. But then we also see it's like, oh, he didn't take it, and he did. But here's one of the plot twists, guys. Castle figured out that the roses on Allison's body were supposed to be grandiflora and not hybrid teas. So that got Beckett into thinking, if the killer was following Castle's books correctly, to the T, I should say, especially for Hell Hath No Fury, Flowers for Your Grave, and there was another book from one of the other victims that they saw, was Ketra Pitney. Now, Allison was killed with 2 shots to the chest with a small caliber gun. Again, Marvin was killed 2 weeks ago, but he was but he was suffocated, and Kendra was stabbed and was laying face down in the pool when they found her. But from those 3 victims, the details were wrong. So, as Castle has graciously explained to us, that if the killer wanted to follow it exactly, the flowers on Allison's body should have been grandiflora, not hybrid teas. And the dress on Kendra should be blue, it should be yellow, not blue. Actually, it was the other way around. It should have been blue, not yellow. And Marvin should have been killed by suffocating of a bag and not with a necktie. So then after they were wrapping it up, like I said, Beckett just kind of was like weird. And then also what Castle couldn't realize was why it went from inconvenient to someone that they know back to inconvenience again. So they go and they talk to the dad, who is Jonathan Tisdale. And while they're talking to them, while Castle and Beckett are talking to him, Castle notices something about Jonathan. And he doesn't tell Beckett until after they leave. Well, Jonathan Tisdale was sick. He had cancer. And how Castle knew that was he's very thin. Not like going to the gym and losing weight thin. He was sick thin. He kept touching his hair because he had a hair piece because he's going through chemotherapy. And he was also wearing makeup to make himself look healthy and things of that nature as well. So then after they found out, talking to Jonathan, they discovered he had another child. His name was Harrison Tisdale. So, it kind of seemed convenient that Harrison had a alibi ready when they were questioning about Allison. But when we're talking about the other 2 victims, he kind of hesitated a little bit. It's like, what's going on here? So, after they go through they check his alibi and everything, it seemed to go okay until they realized that he had another passport and it was forged. And you can obviously, from what they discover, you can get the passport from the black market. So they were able to figure out that Harrison Tisdale murdered Allison and the other 2 victims. Now, the reason why they put Kyle Cabot into play here from that print is because he had a mental issue called pervasive development disorder. And from what Castle explains to the detectives is that it manifests obsessions with one subject and has a history of delusions. Now, how they were able to connect him to Allison was that Allison was his caseworker and she got him a diner job to kind of get him back into reality and kind of get him better into the social life. But, but the other plot twist of Kyle Cabot was, when they were interviewing, when they were looking at Allison's notes about Kyle, trying to figure out put the pieces together, that Kyle Cabot was doing okay. He seemed to be, there was nothing in our notes saying that there's something wrong with him or what, causes him to go downhill from here. But so Harrison had the perfect plan to use Kyle as that, as the fall guy. So that threw out the scent there as well. So, again, your killer for Flowers to Your Grave is none other than her brother, Harrison Tisdale. Now, here's the reason why he killed Allison, Marvin, and Kendra. Now, again, Marvin and Kendra were just inconvenient murders, obviously. But Castle figured out while he was being held hostage by Harrison, of course, because, Castle just doesn't listen. He was supposed to be staying in the car. But he kind of figured out that, obviously, he was $1 million in debt, and his business was going sour. That's how the detectives figured it out. But what Castle was going through is like, maybe you asked Daddy, which was Jonathan at the time, and he asked for money. But he told him, but Jonathan saw him as weak and didn't want to give him that money to help him with his businesses. So that's why Harrison wanted to punish his dad by killing Allison so he can get that money, but also more punishing him so that he knew that his favorite, who was Jonathan's favorite, who was Allison at that particular moment, who was going to get that inheritance, he wanted to punish him. Because, I'm your son too, I love you too, why can't you just help me out? Things like that. So the very cool thing about the ending of episode 1 was that at the end, you see Castle going up to Beckett, saying, hey, this was a lot of fun. And Beckett's like, well, I guess this is it. And he's like, well, wait a minute. It can't be just over. Let's debrief each other over a cup of coffee or something. And Beckett's like, well, it was good to see you, and thanks for all your help. He's like, well, it would have been great. And she leans up to him and says, you have no idea. So that's a little bit of a foreshadowing there, you guys. That, I don't want to get into it because I'm very excited. I want you guys to finish watching it. So then Captain Montgomery calls Beckett into his office and says, hey, the mayor was really impressed by how you and Castle were able to solve the case together, and he is going to base his next book on you. He's going to be shadowing you. And she's like, well, wait a minute. I thought it was just only a one-time thing. Well, apparently he was very impressed with you, So he's like, look, Beckett, when the mayor's happy, my boss is happy. When my boss is happy, that makes me happy. And however long it takes is how long Castle's going to be. Alright, guys, I appreciate you wanting to listen to this podcast about Season 1, Episode 1 of Castle. Please don't forget to like me on Facebook. You can also follow me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, everywhere else on my website as well, from my Facebook page, to listen to my podcast. Tune in next time where we are going to talk about Episode 2, which is titled Nanny McDead. I'm so happy that you guys can join me today. Thank you so much, and let us lounge together. Have a great rest of your day, guys.